Pablo Neruda was actively influenced by the times he was living in. With a massive impact on Latin American history and literature, his half a century of artistic expression resulted in an enormous output spanning thousands of poems and prose work. A deeply sensitive poet with a great faculty for sensory language, Neruda's opera spans a great number of themes ranging from romance to revolution. He isn't just a deeply personal poet, but is also vehemently political in his poetry. His vital role in Chilean politics of his time can be gauged by the fact that he was on the verge of becoming the Chilean president before he withdrew his nomination in favor of the socialist candidate Salvador Allende, whom he actively served as an advisor. Neruda died due to prostate cancer. With a sole message to keep ourselves quiet for a moment, Pablo Neruda hints at a state of equilibrium, where without any movement, without any activity, we shall get a chance to introspect within ourselves about our views and activities, whether we are right or wrong, true or false. The poet here hints to introspect to work for unity, peace and universal brotherhood. He even asks us to retrospect, that is, to look back at our past events and thus evaluate for good. We only get an opportunity to introspect or retrospect when we find ourselves in a state of being quiet. The poet has solicited here that we must cease all our activities and be quiet for a moment and come under one umbrella of silence, breaking the differences we possess. He gives us a call to break the barriers of enmity, every creed, caste, religion and country, and get united to introspect ourselves and despite all negativities, try to create a better world. Neruda urges us not to consider keeping quiet to be total inactivity, but keeping quiet is a state we do the most precious act, that is introspection, retrospection and take a right decision. He even urges inactivity not to be confused with death. He rather gives us a call to think above our single-mindedness. We should stop a while and put aside our possessiveness and narrow-minded thoughts. The poet begins with counting 12, urging everyone to be still. He chose 12 for several reasons. 12 hints at the 12 hours of a day which rule our life. 12 refers to 12 zodiac signs believed to be controlling forces of our lives. 12 refers to 12 months of a year. 12 even may be aimed for a preparation for all to be ready to plunge into the sea of silence. At the heart of this poem is inclusivity. The poem seeks to rise above racial and linguistic differences. This attempt towards inclusion is seen in the opening lines of the poem. The speaker employs the collective we to begin the exercise of keeping quiet. The poet here urges everyone to break the barriers of language and unite with one invisible tune of silence. With the word earth, the poet hints at all the humans living devoid the identity of country, creed and caste. Though language is the identity of a country or race, he affirms that humans are more important and the identity of being a human of earth is broader realization. Language brings differences. The great number of languages seem to highlight the way in which we are different from others. The use of the phrase any language suggests that the speaker recognizes the limits of language and envisions a state beyond the domain of language itself, the realm of silence. The poet here urges to stop for 1 second. Here second represents the tiniest part of time calculation. He ushers us to keep ourselves off for at least 1 second from the negative aspects. Here arms is with dual meaning. He apparently indicates arms as our hands engaged in several activities and at the same time refers to weapons we use for destruction. Keeping quiet then is also about letting our differences dissipate in silence of our similarities. The moving of arms not only harks back to the ceaseless movement of the hands of the clock, but also to the gestures of restlessness and aggression which the modern world is obsessed with. We are always on move. We are all busy in accomplishing our work and go on rushing in our lives. The poet even urged to stop engines. The poet urges us to stop our personal activities and engines and unite in one tune of silence. The hectic pace of a busy life is what makes silence an exotic moment. Like the clock, our lives have become utterly mechanical, dominated by rush and engines. A moment of silence will not only be delightful and rare, but also a strange one. This is because we have internalized rush to such an extent that silence, though enjoyable, has become unfamiliar to us because silence has become rare in this modern world. The poet declares silence as exotic because this silence will make us blissful, strange, and will bring complete equilibrium. A moment of silence will not only be delightful and rare, but also a strange one. This is because we have internalized rush to such an extent that silence, though enjoyable, has become unfamiliar to us because silence has become rare in this modern world. Keeping quiet is one powerful way of escaping the mechanist motion of the modern life. If we be still, we shall be able to introspect the mistakes and wrongs done. Here fishermen are the representatives of all kinds of tyrants and killers. The poet wants them to cease their work and realize their mistakes. Neruda was vocal about his support for conservation of marine resources and marine life, which is reflected in many of his poems. Man's greed not only leads to exploitation of other creatures, but of fellow human beings who are oppressed by the unjust economic system. The salt gatherer is explained as the representative of poor and lower section of the society. They go up to any level to earn their livelihood and often hurt themselves irreparably. Neruda strongly sympathized with the working class and very well understood the strong class divisions that had fractured the society. The sufferings of both the workers in the salt mines and the sea creature in the ocean world end for a moment if we only everybody kept quiet. The theme of environmental conservation and social justice makes its presence strongly felt in this stanza. The poet here condemns the people with green wars and wars with fire. These lines highlight the devastating consequences of war. It seems that all the troubles in the world, from the plight of the whales to the horrors of war, result from someone's inability to keep quiet. By writing about those who prepare wars, the speaker hints at the manufactured nature of war which is intended to satisfy specific interests of interested parties and devastate the lives of others. They became victorious but with no survivors left. The poet mocks at the victory of those people who get victory over destruction. The poet asks them to leave the path of destruction and join the group of silence. He urges them to put on white clothes, white symbolizing purity and serenity. Neruda had been witness to the atrocities committed during the Spanish Civil War under the regime of dictator General Franco. He had seen war in close quarters and very well knew what victory with no survivors looked like. Significant is the assassination of his friend Federico Garcia Lorca by the fascist forces. Neruda had this to say about Spanish Civil War. Doing nothing means nothing negative, in fact self-introspection. If only we could keep quiet, people wagging such wars would put on clean clothes, be free of bloodstains and guilt, and would be able to walk hand in hand with the brothers in the shade in silence and in peace. The poet here warns us that his message of silence should not be confused with total inactivity or inertia. The poet makes it clear that what he is advocating shouldn't be confused with total inactivity, for total inactivity means death, and he has nothing to do with death. He further clears that his message does not have any affinity with death even. His message is aimed at the way of living. He wants us to stop a while and feel the tranquility so that a positive introspection is done. We humans are single-minded. We are always busy in achieving our goals, completing personal responsibilities. These are perhaps amongst the most insightful of lines in the poem, where a stark reality of modern life is highlighted, of being intensely caught up in the web of rush and activity to the extent of not understanding ourselves. It is the tragedy of modern world where people are too busy to live. And we never stop a while to evaluate ourselves and understand ourselves. We never understand that we shall never be able to come out of these desires and achievements. If we could stop a while from these, using we would have understood the real purpose of life and ourselves. If everybody kept quiet for a single moment, a huge silence may interrupt the sadness of being too busy to understand ourselves. Our inability to keep quiet results in our failure to understand ourselves and others. The monotonous rush of life makes individuals threaten oneself with death, and their failure to keep quiet make nations threaten each other with wars. We never stop a while to evaluate ourselves and understand ourselves. Maybe this silence can help us to understand ourselves by interrupting sadness. Mere movement and rush should not be confused with life. Perhaps this is the mistake we have been committing all our lives. We have confused movement with life. We need to keep quiet to know the difference between mindless movement and meaningful living. This realization may help us appreciate life, and this is the reason why the poet helps us remain with this realization, letting us fully understand and appreciate what it means to keep quiet. Rather, we go on with the fear of death calculation, how much of our dreams and wishes will be achieved. In conclusion, the poet taught us through the example of earth, which at one season may look as if dead, but comes back with life in another season. Likewise, our life will also bear a certain meaning when we walk on the right path, that is, introspecting in silence. Mere movement and rush should not be confused with life. Perhaps this is the mistake we have been committing all our lives. We have confused movement with life. Perhaps this is why we need to keep quiet, to know the difference between mindless movement and meaningful living. Perhaps this realization may help us appreciate life, and perhaps this is the reason why the poet helps us remain with this realization before quietly exiting the scene, letting us fully understand and appreciate what it means to keep quiet. In the last two lines, the poet leaves us to introspect as if he himself has gone through the same. The poem opens with the poet's appeal to begin with a count to 12, followed by a moment of silence. The poet links silence with hope for a moment of togetherness. The repetition of the poet's request to the count to 12 in the first and the last stanzas creates a personal space of silence in the poem. The poet seeks this moment of silence as a moment to introspect and meditate, to share a feeling of oneness. The poet wishes that in this selected moment, the fishermen would not kill the whales, and the men gathering salt would give rest to their injured hands. The threat of destruction of the world would come to a halt. In this chosen moment, we would have time to self-assess. The number 12 is dramatically significant to represent our clock time, a moment in real life. The poet longs for a calm, quiet, and peaceful world, devoid of all forms of violence, as he visualizes togetherness of people in a moment of silence and tranquility. According to the poet, this moment will give us time in silence for introspection, when we can spiritually attain our moral self through a moment of meditation. This moment will bring an end to all destructive activities in the world. The fishermen will not be killing whales, and the men gathering salt will have time to rest their injured hands. Environmental degradation will come to an end. The warmongers will be silenced in a moment of brotherhood to meditate and cleanse their souls. The poet hopes that it will be an ideal world where man will be able to come out from his self-centered attitude to gain moral peace. The poem Keeping Quiet tells us about the big impact of silence and self-introspection in making this world a better place.